So, John, when did you start taking medication?
It was about 2 years ago. I'm the type of person who will avoid medication at all costs if I can help it. So I went through, attempting anything I could think of or that I could read online, homeopathic stuff, vitamin D supplements. I was working out heavily, like 5 days a week. I just thought, well, this is probably seasonal affective disorder or, environmental, because I had a lot of stuff going on with my job at the time too. I wasn't happy in my career. And so there were a lot of other external factors. And so, about 2 years ago, I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, this isn't working and I'm about to start a family and I don't ever want my daughter to see me like this.
So was your wife pregnant at the time?
I think it was right before she got pregnant. So maybe we're going on possibly 3 years now, I think. And so it was, I know we were definitely actively trying at that point. And I was like, okay, I have to get this straightened out. Because, I don't know, people probably aren't, who don't suffer from depression probably aren't as familiar with the fact that there are definitely hereditary aspects to it, and it definitely runs in my family. I've got a brother who takes medication. I've got my dad as well, and we're fairly certain that my grandfather did as well.
Yeah,
undiagnosed and untreated, but we're fairly certain that he suffered from it for a large part of his life.
So looking back now, you saw a doctor, I'm guessing, family doctor, and he put you on something. What did he put you on?
So yeah, I started out, I started going to a counselor because I thought, well, okay,
sure,
maybe I could talk this out. I always, you know me, I always think that I can reason things out. So I'll talk it out. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
So I started with that, and I went to, and actually it was a counselor who is affiliated through the, I guess the church that we go to.
Sure.
And so it was a biblical counselor, and I thought, okay, this is the way to go. This feels good.
Yeah, because I've got God and counseling,
right?
Spirituality and psychology. Like I can't lose. Like this is going to work.
Her prayers have more weight, right? So I've always told her that. But so I started going to her, and she was super supportive. She said, all right, we'll start with the therapy portion of it, and she recommended some supplements and some things because a lot of people are severely vitamin D deficient.
Sure.
And I found out later that I was as well. But I went to her for probably about a year or so until I got to the point where I was like, I can't get a handle on this. And so then, through my family doctor, between the two of them, I was prescribed Lexapro. And so I started out with a low dosage of that, and then kind of up that dosage until we kind of found a level that, could kind of manage my depression.
Was it so you identify that you need some help, and the first thing you do is, I think probably a really good thing. You want to just talk about it. Some people that are wise, trained, can point you in the right direction. Did you experience a certain level of frustration when that sort of, I'm using air quotes now, like didn't work and you had to like take further measures? Like, did you experience any additional anxiety? Was there any additional feelings of like wrestling, struggling with that?
Not so much. I think it was just kind of, and maybe this is just me. I certainly don't speak for everyone who suffers from depression, but I know for me, it was just a matter of, okay, this didn't work. Let's move on to the next thing until we figure it out. But at least I was at a point where I was willing to admit that, I needed help and I couldn't do it on my own.
Right.
So it was more along the lines of I was hopeful at all points and just kind of waiting to find the right medication or the right combination of things to improve things.
Sure. Looking back, like before you started to seek treatment, like how long, hindsight's 2020, how long would you say that you remember wrestling with something?
Oh man. I've thought about that a lot, actually. Definitely most of my 20s, I think. Probably going back possibly to my teens for a long time. And, my dad also was kind of the same thing. Had probably suffered from it for a long time, much longer than he's been on medication for it. And, so I'd kind of seen the telltale signs, through others. And so for me, I was able to kind of pick up on it probably because of that a little bit earlier than maybe I would have. But yeah, definitely through my 20s for sure.
Yeah.
And once you know the symptoms and once you can identify those, like, it's kind of easy to see it in others,
I bet.
and definitely easier to look back and say, okay, yeah, that's probably what that was.
Man. Was something that you were struggling with, and then fast forward, you eventually sought counsel and started to get treatment for it. What does it feel like?
Oh man, that's a good question. Everyone's symptoms, I mean, there's obviously a list of symptoms. And when you go in to a counselor or a doctor, and they look to see if you are a candidate for depressants, essentially, there is a checklist that they go through to see if you meet the criteria for someone who may be suffering from depression. Depression, there are essentially three levels of depression: mild, moderate, and severe. I was diagnosed with moderate, so I can only imagine what severe must be like. I've never, for example, had suicidal thoughts or anything of that nature, but I've known people around me who have. And so basically my personal symptoms were just overall melancholy. When I hit a low, when I can't manage my symptoms, my depression, it's very much of a situation where I don't want to do anything. I don't want to get up. Very much a lack of motivation. Just, as I've just described it, even to my wife, it's kind of like, so you might have an emotional reaction to something in your life, right? But as opposed to having a normal level of emotional reaction, it's amplified to an extreme. So I had a moment, I don't mind sharing this, where I was alone with my daughter for 5 days. My wife went out of town, and it was like the first time she had been gone, and so I was like, this is great. I've got some great bonding time with my daughter, and my daughter, she is adorable.
She's like sunshine personified.
Oh, just huge, just happy personality, and I mean, she's
golden curly locks, little dimples.
Yeah.
Sweet little voice. I always see her when she's in her pajamas too, and goodness.
Little footies.
Oh.
But I mean, she's a sweetheart anyway. So, I probably would have felt this way anyway. But by the end of that 5 days, I realized I was going to put her to bed. I'm like, that 5 days is over already. And I really had a good time with, spending time with her and being able to really bond one-on-one. Cause I'm not home every day. I work Monday through Friday.
I get that. Yeah.
So, I went to put her to bed, and of course she was extra cute that night. She put on her little Daniel Tiger owl mask. She wanted to wear that to bed. And she was super tired, so she's cuddled up on her teddy bear that she calls Teddy B.
Dude,
and
stop.
Yeah. And so I put her to bed, and I walk out of that room, and I am a mess.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
Like, I would say crying, but it was more like just uncontrollable weeping for about a half an hour.
Hot tears, red.
Yes.
Yeah, I get that.
Just I could not stop. And
You
in
were
the middle
blubbering.
of it, I was.
Yeah.
And
I've been there.
yeah, it's like, okay, that's a normal reaction to a degree. But the level at the point where I'm like, man, I just can't stop. I just feel just so depressed right now. Like, I don't even want to go back to work tomorrow.
Like it was like swallowing you.
Yeah. Just, I felt overwhelmed by it. Like I couldn't control it. Like, I look back, and when I was talking to my wife about it, I remember I called her that night. She was coming home later that night, and I was like, I need to go in and talk to my doctor.
Oh man.
Things are a little out of whack. And at that point, by the way, I had been on the Lexapro
Sure.
dose for a couple of years. And so I'd been on it for a while, and I had noticed something was a little off. Like once you've dealt with it for a while, you can kind of feel
Sure.
when things are a little off.
Like your levels or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah. And the way I've always described it is Lexapro for me has always felt like I can still feel the dips or the lows coming on, but I could almost feel, and this is weird probably, but I could almost feel like the Lexapro just forming like a wall, and it just hits that wall. And it's like, nope, we're not going to drop.
I don't think that's weird.
So like for me, it's always been like, Lexapro's always been this beautiful thing because it just kind of prevents me from being able to really dive deep into this low. And for some reason, for the 2 weeks prior to that incident, like I just felt like, man, I feel kind of feeling the melancholy again, and kind of the just everything. I was very super irritable. That's another sign, and just like just really bored. Everything just felt like I was not interested in anything. Nothing was really lighting my fire at that point. And Jamie was noticing my wife. She's like, man, he's a little grumpy lately. And so
you had a little surgery too.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah, I had foot surgery. So this is shortly after that, and so I could kind of feel, this coming on. And then so when that
does that make you worry? It's like I'm on medication.
Yeah.
Like things are going on, and I feel like it's not enough, or it's not doing it, or something else is going on, or that's got to feel pretty.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a person who values my relationships around me to the fullest. I mean, I've always been a very social person. I've always been, I'd like to think, a super loyal friend, and
totally.
And so like, I know that if I can't get a handle on my emotions, and if I'm not, my normal self, then I know that can negatively impact my relationships. And so that concerns me, because the whole reason I went out in the first place was because I'm like, I don't want this to negatively impact my marriage. I certainly don't want my daughter to see me like that. And so, yeah. So
good
I was
on
like,
you, man.
Oh man.
I mean, for you and everybody else that's listening to this, like, I have never myself personally struggled with these kinds of things. And all I can say is like, just good job. Like, thank you. Like, I mean, it's just, yeah, just, that's great. Like, doing something about it. I just feel like there's probably so many people. I know, like you had mentioned, your dad is on medication and didn't start until he was, into his whatever years. I don't know when it was, but like later in life. And same thing happened to my mom. And all I know is like when she finally like made that step, it was a game changer. And it's like, good job, because getting over that hurdle, because it's not just for you, it's for yourself. And I love what you said. It wasn't you relating it to your wife, your kid, your friends, your colleagues, your neighborhood, whatever you want to say. I think that's a really important step. Like, it's not just about you. You aren't just about you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I've known people in my life since high school, and up through college. I've got, friends and acquaintances and people who are around me, as well as family members who have dealt with this illness and on varying levels of extremes. And I've had friends attempt suicide, and, because it got to that level, untreated, undiagnosed, and yeah, man, I think my dad, your mom, I think there was this stigma from that generation where it was just, especially for males.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
dude, viewed as a weakness.
Still is,
and that's so stupid.
So stupid.
Even though more women statistically than men suffer from depression, there are still thousands and thousands of men out there who deal with this, and it's kind of viewed as this kind of like, you just need to buck up, son, and quit crying and get over it, and work out more, whatever, go hunting, whatever, whatever masculine activity you need to do. And I'm telling you, man, that's not the way it works.
No, man, that's total bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It is a chemical imbalance, and sure, there are environmental issues with that, and there are, vitamin deficiencies and stuff like that. A lot of people get the winter blues.
It's a complicated issue. Just like we talk about on the show, and to borrow from Rob Bell and from Heschel and from all these great thinkers, like there's no such thing as physical, emotional, or spiritual as these segmented, compartmentalized phenomenons. They're entangled.
Yeah.
They're influential upon each other. They are a system that works together. Like everything is like part of everything else.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, of course there's chemical imbalances. There is. And like, who knows if this is kind of like autism and Asperger's now, where it's like it's been going on for a long time, and just now we're starting to get language and data and diagnoses and these kinds of things, and are starting to get into the popular consciousness. And maybe a lot of people have suffered from we know that a lot of people have suffered from depression since God knows who long. Like I know, like one of the most famous like preachers of all time, Charles Haddon Spurgeon, chronic depression.
Yeah.
Chronic depression. One of the best hymn writers ever, William Cooper, chronic depression. Luther, depression.
Yeah.
Like all of these guys, depression. And you said your dad is a pastor.
Yeah.
And he is medicated as well. I just think that is, people need to hear this stuff.
Yeah. And like you said, my dad didn't go on medication until probably almost his 50s, I want to say. I mean, it's been a long time.
Good for him.
And even that was not the most fun situation, just because it's an inexact science, right? So everybody's bodies are different. Everybody's chemical situation is completely different. And so it's kind of a crapshoot. You start out on a low dosage, and it's all about med checks and going in and them,
how you doing? How you doing? How you feeling?
Yeah.
What's going on? Yeah.
And so, for my dad, when he first went on, for example, that part of it had to do with the fact he went to kind of an old school doctor at the beginning, and this dude just put him on way too much stuff.
Oh.
So he ended up with a better doctor who, did a much better job. We'll put it that way.
Oh man.
But it's a prime example of just not the correct dosage, putting him on too much too soon, and all this stuff. And
sure. It's like you need to be on lithium and benzodiazepines and tricyclics and Adderall and dopamine and SSRIs and SNRIs, and oh my gosh, it's like the movie Garden State.
Yeah. It was like a wacky cocktail. And so, I mean, the adverse effects, my dad became kind of this zombie,
Oh man.
lost a ton of weight, and he's always had this, just jolly belly. And when that's not there, we know
dad
something's
belly.
up. Yeah.
It's dad belly.
Dad bod.
Yeah.
So so for my dad and for many, many others, it was a matter of the doctor taking the time and trying to figure out the right balance for him, the right medications. For me, Lexapro is a beautiful thing. It's a very gentle medication, and it works well for me. For others, that may not even phase them.
Right.
They may need to try something else, and so
or multiples
or different dosages.
Yeah.
For me
Goodness.
now, I'm on 2 different medications.
Okay.
As well as a vitamin D supplement that is insane, and I didn't even know existed. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, apparently my vitamin D levels this last time around were in the cellar. So I'm on 50,000 IUs.
It's because you're Scottish and you hate the sun.
It's true. I have very fair skin.
So with your dad, was there any stigma attached to the fact that he was, this long-term pastor? Like, what was obviously he's not here right now, but do you remember him saying anything about, or did you pick up on anything about the fact that not only is he a man, not only is he like the patriarch of his family,
sure,
but he's a pastor?
It's funny. My dad has a handful of degrees. I tease him all the time. He just collects degrees, but his second master's degree is actually in mental health counseling.
No way.
And so I think around the time that he was finishing up this degree, I think that was kind of around the time where he was like, okay, I need to go in and figure something out here.
Like this is applying to me too.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I don't recall any stigma attached or any negativity surrounding him choosing to go on medication.
But you said it took him a lot long. Like you said, it took him a while.
Yeah. And I think there is something, and I'm speaking obviously for him now. I don't know for sure, but I think there's definitely something to most people, because I know I did this, where I was like, well, I have a lot of environmental stuff going on right now, you know? And so sometimes it's hard to separate the environmental stuff out from what's truly potentially a chemical imbalance.
Totally. So you're saying I'm not depressed. It's just this. It's this pressure.
Yeah,
it's my new boss.
Right.
It's, you know, this pain in the ass congregant. It's,
right.
You know, I hate my elder board right now, or, you know, we're money trouble, or we moved, or you're married, or whatever. Is that what you mean by like environmental?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Just things going on around you, stressors caused by everyday life. And so, you know, for me, I thought for sure, you know, just job I hated.
Man, I get that.
You know, and whatever the case may be. And so I think perhaps there was a little bit of that. You know.
Yeah, he's a pastor.
Yeah,
I mean, there's always. Oh my gosh, I know a little about that.
Yeah,
just a little.
The church politics, man, they don't tell you about that when you go to seminary. So. Yeah, there's certainly a large degree of stress, you know, that comes with the job. And so, you know, I wonder, there's probably a portion of it that he attributed to that. And so I think, you know, I got lucky in regards to the fact that my dad went before me in identifying his depression and getting treatment for it. So it was probably easier for me, right?
Sure, of course.
You know, probably a decade later when I was like, all right, this is probably what it is.
Well, the cool thing about that, man, is you had mentioned how depression is generational.
Right.
And how it's, you know, something that's passed down, and that's got to be a huge burden for a parent to think like, you know, as soon as my kids are struggling with depression, if I struggle with depression, it's like, you know, this guilt and shame and this burden of like, man, did I do this to them? Did I put this on them? Right. But look at how your dad broke that cycle by like getting medicated first and passing down almost like a solution along with the burden. I mean, it's undoing a lot of it. And I think that's so beautiful. And if parents are listening to this right now and they're contemplating, you know, that same thing, like just take that for what it's worth. We're not telling you what to do, but consider the fact that you don't just have the opportunity to pass down your genetics. You have your opportunity to pass down decisions and wisdom. And I'll
absolutely.
my soapbox here.
No, that's exactly it. If nothing else, the fact that my dad was able to humble himself and, you know, proceed with some sort of treatment plan allowed me to not only identify those characteristics in myself, but see that it was totally okay for me to go in and try to say, you know what, I can't do this on my own anymore. It's time for me to try to step it up and you know, possibly look at some medication options.
Spirit of my silence, I can hear you, but I'm afraid to be near you, and I don't know where to begin.
So, inside the church, this has a lot of stigma attached to it. We live in the West, and in the West, whether we like it or not, the health and wealth, prosperity theology has just completely infiltrated every corner of the church. I don't care how far and hard and whatever you try to do to get away from it, it's there. So knowing that there's this current, this infection within spirituality, Christianity, whatever, and you're trying to participate in a faith community, and you're struggling with this, I mean, how do you see churches typically handling this issue? I want to hear from you. I mean, as a pastor, I've got my own theoretical perspectives, which maybe I can add in later, but what I'm really curious about is, as someone who has struggled and struggles with depression, how does the church usually handle this kind of stuff?
I think it entirely depends on what type of church that you are a part of. So I was born and raised Lutheran, ELCA Lutheran, Evangelical Lutheran Church of America.
Yeah.
And I think they've been a little more progressive on the mental health issue. So so I saw others, pretty well supported.
That's good.
Within our church, certainly within our church. But I know, having been a part of other churches within other denominations or non-denominational, not real well. I think there is this stigma attached to it, or this shame, or this you just need to pray harder.
Yeah, almost like it's a symptom, like that something's wrong in your life, or you don't have enough faith, or
it's something that can be prayed away. And I certainly, I'll put my Christian hat on for a second. I certainly believe in the power of prayer. I wouldn't do it if I didn't believe that there was some positive effect of prayer.
Sure.
However, I also believe strongly that God created human beings with different gifts, different giftings, and just as an example, you and I have two very different gifts. You are an amazing speaker, and that is definitely a gift that you've been given, and I believe likewise that there are other people who are born with the gifts to be doctors and scientists and athletes and whatever. And so for me, I've seen too many times where there's a situation where a pastor or a congregation or a community had an opportunity to say, you know what, brother or sister, I think there are people that God has blessed with gifts that can truly help you in a long-term basis, and they're psychiatrists or psychologists or counselors or doctors, whatever, who can really help you out. And instead, though, I think the reaction has been, well, let's just pray and let's just pray about it, and God will heal you.
Almost like we're still back in the first century, believing in like that literal form of like demon possession. Yeah. Where it's just like, oh yeah, just pray the demon out. Just pray the demon out. Like, if you're depressed, or if you struggle with anxiety or panic disorder, or, bipolar disorder, whatever, whatever mental illness or whatever you want to call it, you're struggling with, there's this kind of like, oh, well, those things are spiritual because we can't see them. Right. And can't evaluate it under a microscope. And so since we can't see it, it must be spiritual. And so we should pray. And if the prayer doesn't work, maybe you deserve it, or whatever. Maybe there's something wrong in your spiritual life. And it's just, there's nothing that makes me more angry than that.
That just takes it to a whole new level of bad at that point.
I'm getting mad right now. I need to take a drink. Hold on.
Yeah, it's like, that individual is probably already feeling a great deal of guilt and shame, and then that just takes it to a whole new level. And I'm like, you are so full of shit if you think that's the way to go about it. And again, certainly to go back to the whole prayer thing, like I certainly believe there's a time and a place where prayer can do amazing things.
Never stop praying.
Never stop praying. But it should be a prayer and situation. There are wonderful doctors out there. My doctor, personally...
show me the verse. I'm sorry. Just show me the verse in the Bible, because I don't want to get away from this. Show me the verse in the Bible, since, most of these people that say this are biblical literalists anyway. Show me the verse in the Bible that says pray only. Right. Like we should just sit around and just pray, like about like for everything, and just not lift a finger, not do anything. Like it's just so silly. Right. So dumb.
Well, and firsthand, my medical doctor is an amazing human being, and is always running behind because of the fact that he takes as much time as he needs to with each patient to make sure that they're well cared for. And he also happens to be a Christian. And so I think it's
how do you know that he's a Christian? Just out of curiosity.
He brought it up once.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, he said, I don't even remember how it came up. It may have been when I first started.
It just means like the reason I asked it must inform what he does. Otherwise he wouldn't bring it up. Like it's not like he's
absolutely.
That's cool.
And really cool. Yeah, I think it may have come up the first time he started treating me for depression.
Right on.
And I just remember that he immediately was like, he came on his lunch break to take care of me. That's the kind of guy this guy is. So I know firsthand that there are Christians out there who are using their God-given gifts to help others.
Man, and that's the answer to prayer.
Yes, that is my answer to prayer. We prayed for years that I would find some sort of solution to this issue, and my solution was Dr. B.
Yeah.
And so the second time around, when I was like, okay, something's off, I need to go back in and see him. I got on that new fancy hub thing, where you can essentially email your doctor.
Yeah.
And so I did. I said, I think something's off, and immediately that night at like 9:30 p.m., he's like, come in Friday morning. I'll squeeze you in.
Wow.
He's like, I will take care of you.
Man, that's so cool.
And
that
so,
is such an answer to prayer.
Yeah. And so that for me is it. I never felt, at least this time around, I never felt like, there's no hope. I immediately felt a little better, because I knew I was going to go in and that he was going to take care of me, and that it may not work right away, but I knew eventually somewhere down the line we were going to find the right, combination, and I was going to feel better again. And I do,
Right. Man, I love that. It's almost like that, that there's this old like preacher's anecdote that everybody's probably heard, but it's fitting to say it again, where the guy is drowning in the middle of the ocean and prays that God would save him. And he prays and he prays and he prays and he hears, from God, like, yes, I'm going to save you. And a helicopter comes in out of nowhere, and they, helicopter down, like to the guy, like hover down to the guy, and they say, come on, we're here to save you. And he goes, nope, God's going to save me. And they're like, what? Yeah, God's going to save me. And they're like, all right. So they get out of there. Next thing you know, like a boat, like a speedboat, like comes up over the horizon and passes the guy. And they're like, hey, we're here to save you. Nope, God's going to save me. What? Yeah, God's going to save me. I'm waiting for God. Okay. And so like, thing after thing after thing happens. And, the point is like, we pray or quote unquote or whatever, wish for things. But when they don't look like divine or they don't look spiritual, if they just look normal, then it's not salvation or whatever. We're all waiting on this like salvation that looks, I don't know, like spiritual.
Right.
And it's just stupid.
Sometimes the answer to prayer is not a quick fix. Sometimes it is a long and curvy road. And that doesn't mean that it's any less effective. That just means sometimes it takes a little longer than we'd like.
Man. So staying with this whole like church theme, spiritual theme, and depression, John, how would you say that your quote unquote, like your faith life or your quote unquote, like spiritual life, your view of God, your view of salvation, whatever, has been affected by struggling with this?
That's a good question. I don't think that it's been negatively impacted. I think if anything, I've seen that there are people out there who struggle just like me, and there are people out there who are more than ready to help. And like to go back to what we were talking about before, there are people out there who
that's awesome.
Not only are they ready to help, are willing to help and want to help, but they are fully capable of helping find that solution.
Man.
Bring that light to that darkness, when you feel out of control.
Yeah.
And so I see the hope, and I feel hopeful. And
man, that's great.
Yeah. And I just want other people to know that, there are solutions out there, and there are answers, and there are people that can help you if you just, seek it. Go out and try to find it. I mean, there are definitely resources all over the place, especially now with the with the internet and everything. I mean, there are no shortage of places, in almost any town, where you can go and get help, for any number of mental illnesses. I'm not just talking about depression either. I've seen firsthand the effects of bipolar disorder. I had a kid that worked for me,
sure,
who suffered from it, and it's a scary thing when it's untreated. And schizophrenia as well. Dude.
Yeah.
And so these aren't things that can just go away on their own. These are things that need treatment. We have effective treatment for them. But I think we have to start with the fact that, especially as Christians, that this is not a weakness. This is not something to brush under the rug. People are dying from this every day. This is something that we, as folks who don't suffer from it, the best thing that they can do is help support that individual and say, you know what, don't be ashamed. We're going to get through this together. And the best advice that, for example, that my dad's doctor ever gave us when they were trying to find the right balance of medication for him is, you just have to say, look, I love you. I just want you to be better.
That's awesome.
Amethyst and flowers on the table. Is it real or a fable? Well, I suppose a friend is a friend, and we all know how this will end.
I think this is kind of important for the people that listen to this show. Like we're a podcast that deals with concepts that often alienate people from their families, their churches, their tribes, their friends, and we've been talking about depression and anxiety and mental illness on this in this conversation, and I just think that we've got to bring it back to this. We call it deconstruction, but most of the people listening to this have had some kind of a trauma. I know I have. Like I don't struggle with depression in the way that you do, or anxiety or things like that. I've never had that kind of experience, but I have felt the anxiety of knowing that I've been repressing things and knowing that I've been artificially upholding quote unquote beliefs just to maintain connection with people, my family specifically, my friends, my mom, my own identity, like the way that I've often constructed the vision of who I see myself being and becoming. And a lot of the concepts of, wrestling with, like, do I think the Bible is really literally true? Do I think that Jesus is literally what I've always been told? Do I think that God is what I've been told that he or it or whatever is? And a lot of that is just a question mark for me right now. And I'm a pastor, and I'm a person that's had a faith community for a long time, that a lot of the people coming along with me aren't asking those questions or feel like there's something wrong with you if you are. And I do feel some anxiety because of that, but I imagine those listening, maybe yourself included, John, I'd love to hear what you think about this. Does this exacerbate that for you or for others? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Are there people, or you or people listening to the show, like, does this make matters worse?
Oh, I think it certainly can. For me, I think I was almost fortunate in the regard that when I was dealing with my depression issues, it was kind of before I started diving into the deconstruction of my own faith. But I think for people that are kind of dealing with both simultaneously, I mean, that could absolutely be traumatic to the highest order, And, when you start to kind of pull things apart, and if you get to the level where you're like, I don't know if God exists, and you're dealing with depression at the same time, where you're really suffering from a lack of hope in general, that could be absolutely devastating,
I think it's like anything else. A lot of people, from what I know, and my knowledge is all theoretical, so I'll just caveat with saying that. Mostly theoretical. But what I do know is that a lot of times with anxiety and depression, sometimes it just happens. Sometimes it just hits you like a wave. I've literally heard people say that. I was sitting in my office, I was sitting at my computer, everything was fine, and then I was in a panic attack. I was in the throes of a panic attack. Yeah. And that panic attack started some thing in my body, in my chemistry, that never stopped. And I eventually needed to seek medication or whatever. So there are some people where it quote unquote hits them out of nowhere. And, whether or not that's true, whether or not there's things that, have been repressed or whatever that we need to talk about, neither here nor there. But then some people, they know that there's just been a lot, it doesn't hit them out of nowhere. It's been this long kind of slow struggle like you had talked about. Like, I knew back in my teenage years or whatever. But then, so my point in talking about all this is for those people that you can attribute it to something. Maybe your spouse left you, or you found out your spouse was cheating on you. Maybe your parents got divorced. Maybe you got picked on as a kid. Maybe there were financial troubles. Maybe, there was just there was a death in the family. Something happened. And you can say, pretty much since then, I've been struggling.
Yeah.
And that's real. And then, okay, so that means you had a platform, you had something solid in your life that became not solid.
Yeah.
Maybe it vanished completely. Be it the relationship between your parents, you and your parents, you and your partner, whatever. God works that way, or faith works that way. One day it seems solid and you're standing on it.
Yeah.
The next day it's like not so solid. And then one day you wake up and you're like, I don't even know if it's there anymore and I feel like I'm falling. And if you struggle with anxiety and depression,
yeah, and a lot of that too. You talk about traumatic events in a person's life. At the very least, if medication isn't the right avenue for you, at the very least, there is so much benefit to going to somebody, a counselor, a therapist, just someone that can help you walk through it.
yeah,
Somebody that you can talk to, vent to, somebody who's trained as a professional who can help you manage that in your life. And I'm certainly not saying that medication is always the answer. Not everyone's issues are, a chemical imbalance in the brain, right? Like some are though. And I'm saying in those cases where you've absolutely tried everything, I certainly advocate exercise and a good diet and, and community and, being able to be honest with someone, and be able to talk to someone, your best friend, your wife, your spouse, whoever.
Yeah.
But I'm saying when all of those things aren't working,
Right.
then, there's nothing wrong with going to therapy and talking to someone. That doesn't make you weak. That doesn't make you we're all broken.
Dude.
Let's be real.
Come on.
We're all a little broken, and
It's
there's
part of
nothing wrong with
being
it.
alive.
Yeah.
It's part of existing.
Life will knock the shit out of you.
It's part of it.
And it's just
Because
a matter of
it's
how
real.
we respond. Yeah.
Yes.
It's all about how we respond.
Gotta get rid of the stigma, man.
Yeah. Like if you want to be the best person, the most whole person you can be, there are people out there with giftings who can help you. That's what I'm saying,
Man. It's like
And-
our friend Colin Rigsby and the Vespertine song, like we all make different sounds when we break.
Yeah.
I love that line, man. I love that line. It's so true.
You know what I think of too? We had the benefit, recently of being able to go to see Peter Rollins live, our BFF.
Best friends forever.
He is the sweetest man on the planet.
He really is.
Him and I would say Alexander Shai. Those two,
Oh,
come
dude.
on, knocking it out of the park.
Man.
But Peter does this amazing live show called Pints and Parables, and one of the parables, not to give it away, but kind of the moral of the story of one of the parables that he does in this live show is that there's this woman who loses a child.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And the moral of the story is that you can't bring that child back, but there are others somewhere who have dealt with the same trauma that you have.
Yep.
That can help walk you through that, and to embrace that suffering and to grieve appropriately,
Right.
and to be able to, in a sense, pick up the pieces and move on.
And like for others of you that are listening to this program right now, even if you don't struggle, maybe you're more like me and it's not something that hits you acutely. Maybe it hits you in small ways, but not in a way that you've needed. Like I've been in and out of counseling like ever since I was finally wise enough to go, like a decade ago. And I've got a great counselor that I'm in and out of seeing all the time. But I've never had to be medicated, and maybe that's you, and maybe you're like, oh, I don't struggle with this. But you know what? You don't know what's going to happen down the road, and there are people around you, and to be sensitive about this, going through, if you're listening to this program, going through this deconstruction, going through these changes and these evolutions, do produce a certain level of anxiety. And if you're unaware of that, or if you're not admitting that, that's probably really unhealthy. Like if you have your chest puffed out and you've got your cape flapping in the breeze, and you just think you're awesome because you're deconstructing, you're probably about to fall off a cliff and you don't know it. Or you're probably hurting a lot of people around you by flaunting it. And that's not good either. That's evidence of another kind of mental illness, maybe being a sociopath or just having absolutely no compassion at all. My point in saying all this is no matter if you suffer with it or not, it affects you. It affects everyone around you. And that Pete Rollins parable is so great because when you start to talk to people and you start to become vulnerable, you start to connect, and new life almost starts to resurrect where that loss was.
Yeah.
That is so cool. So, you lost this thing, you lost your faith, you lost your tribe, you lost your parent, you lost whatever. And the more you process that with other people and you let them share their stories, this new kind of life emerges that it's brand new. It doesn't just take the place of that other thing. It's a new space. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, and for me, it took me a long time, even though I wasn't in a church situation or even in a family situation where I was necessarily shamed, in any way. I always felt supported. Even having said all that, it took me a long time to be able to admit to anyone around me, even in my inner circle, that, hey, I'm on medication for this, It took me a long time, but when I finally did, it was amazing how many other people that I know around me who are like, "Oh yeah, dude, I'm on that too," or "I'm on this," or
You're
"I'm
like,
on
what?
this other thing."
Tell
I'm
me
like,
about that.
Huh?
How did it go for you? Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Incredible. And let me just say that the women listening out there, postpartum is a real deal, and it's a
Don't I know it?
It's a rough thing. It's real, and I know a ton of women who finally just realize that, hey, I need something. I need some sort of help, and we're able to reach out and get that help. And
Absolutely.
and
My wife, oh my gosh, dude,
Mine
it
too.
hit
Yeah.
her hard, super hard. Extra medication, extra counseling, extra everything.
yeah, something guys will never understand, but
Nope.
it's that.
But we get to experience on the other side of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the best thing that we can do as guys is just be as supportive as humanly possible and say, look, you know what? I will do whatever it takes to
Anything.
to get you to a place where you feel whole and well again.
Yeah.
So,
Now that I fell into your arms, my only lover, give out
to close this up, I just want to say a few things about the nature of depression. And that is that depression is a common mental disorder. People around you are dealing with this now. This is something that is not just a weakness. It's not something that is a character flaw. This is something that is common, and you are surrounded by people who are dealing with this now. Recent stats from the on a worldwide basis here, globally, an estimated 350 million people of all ages suffer from depression. This is something that is rampant globally. Depression is actually the leading cause of disability worldwide and is a major contributor to the overall global burden of disease. Now, even though I mentioned earlier, more women are affected by depression than men, it's still an issue for both genders. At worst, depression can lead to suicide, and I would imagine there are people listening to this now who have been affected by that and who that rings true to. And for those people, I am really, really sorry. There are effective treatments out there for depression, and so the idea behind this episode is to say, hey, if it's not you, it's someone around you, and we can do better. We can help those people. We can support those people. We can get them treatment that they need. So as I said, depression is a common illness worldwide where an estimated 350 million people are affected. It's different than just, a mood fluctuation and a short-lived emotional response to challenges that you might be dealing with in your everyday life. This is something that's long-lasting with moderate or severe intensity, and it may become a serious health condition. So if you're noticing this in the people around you, this is something that can manifest and create issues in their work life and their family life, and like I said, at worst, it can lead to suicide. The most sobering statistic that I've found is that over 800,000 people die due to suicide every year. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in 15 to 29-year-olds. And in some countries, that is actually on the rise. So what I'm saying is, overall, it is second only to automobile-related deaths. That, if it was any other illness, would be an epidemic. And even though we know these stats and we know that there are treatments out there available to help people in these situations, fewer than half of those affected in the entire world, and in a lot of countries, fewer than 10% actually receive such treatments. And there are a whole host of reasons why this could be, inadequate medical care, misdiagnosis, things of that nature. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of it is stigma, and a lot of it is just not understanding the nature of the illness. So, as we said in the episode, there are a lot of symptoms. There are a lot of resources online. Obviously, it's gotten to the point where it's seen as enough of an issue worldwide that the World Health Assembly passed a resolution in May of 2013 that called for comprehensive coordinated response to mental health disorders at country level. It's gotten to that level. So if you or anyone you know are dealing with any kind of illness beyond just depression, just know that there are resources available to you, especially now, with the internet. There are resources in your town, I guarantee it. There are people you can talk to. And if you're in a situation, if you're in a church or if you're in a community that doesn't support you going to see, some sort of specialist, then get out. You need to get help. Make sure it doesn't get to the point where it gets so severe that you think that your only option is to take your own life. So I just want to offer the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. If you or anyone you know is at the level where they feel like they might hurt themselves or they have no other option, please call this number. It's 1-800-273-8255. It's available 24 hours every single day, and there are people there that can help you. Please, if you guys have any stories or if you guys feel like this did something for you, we are always available to talk to. But again, if it's that severe, please call that number. Again, I'll give it one more time, 1-800-273-8255. And we just hope that this benefited you guys in some way.